So there I was on eBay trying to find an ancient alien chess set for sale. Why seems like a fair question to ask. It was because of something someone said in a YouTube video. The someone is Deconstructing, and the something is at minute 24 of his video on some supposedly ancient alien carvings known as the Aztlan Collection. He says, "We got a chessboard."
We got a chessboard.
We do indeed got a chessboard, and it comes with all the pieces and a box to store them in. It was allegedly pulled from the ground in Mexico from a site where hundreds of ancient relics have been found that prove Earth had contact with an advanced alien species. As a ufologist, I wanted to find it. Deconstructing is naturally skeptical of how a chessboard can survive completely intact for thousands of years without any of the bits going missing, especially something so fantastical as one that depicts ancient aliens.
All right, I'm hard-pressed to believe that a chessboard that's not missing any pieces after thousands of years exists.
Which is fair, but that still has the question, where did the chessboard come from? The reason I was on eBay looking for it was to see if it was for sale, specifically because it comes from a guy named Mike Forrest. Mike Forrest runs the Alien Carvings website, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, merch store, Amazon bookstore, and naturally eBay profile, and he hopes to one day open a museum. He's got a combined following of 700,000 people across his different social media platforms, where he shares video and photos of dig sites in 2 locations in Mexico where he and his team unearth these alleged ancient Mesoamerican artifacts. The artifacts themselves, known as the Aztlan Collection, are, interesting. This one is a pipe that has a cute little UFO at one end and an alien to hold your mystery leaf at the other. This one's also a pipe, and this one's a little guy who could hold your J for you. Mike sells a t-shirt with that one printed on it, or at least I assume he does. The t-shirt design's obviously a mock-up, so I'm not actually sure what would happen if I ordered one. I guess I'll find out when it arrives. This ancient artifact is an Omnitrix. It's one of actually 3 stone watches Mike Forrest has on his Instagram, each one sillier and sillier caricatures of a watch, none of which would ever work, all of which are absolutely delightful. This one is a magical scrying mirror, where every part of it has developed a super thick patina and heavy wear, except for the actual surface of the mirror, which is without a single scratch at all. Allegedly, it's a solid piece of obsidian. Ooh! We've got a snake lady, this guy, this lovely gentleman, and quite a few tiny dudes. Here's one that just has a light bulb in it, and here's a clip of Mike on a podcast claiming that one's totally real.
They'll light up crystals like a light bulb.
By the way, can I just quickly add that I get intensely frustrated by this whole attitude that some podcasters seem to have of, oh, I just platform guests. I don't make any substantive claims about whether or not they're saying is true. I just want to have interesting conversations with people who have interesting things to say. Come to your own conclusions. What's the point of you being there then? Why does it have to be your podcast? Isn't the whole point of a podcast to listen to the host give their opinions on something? I don't know, maybe I'm the weird one, but if I wanted to find unusual ideas I hadn't been exposed to before that are extremely controversial, I would go looking for them. I wouldn't just follow a podcast that puts those things in front of my eyes. When I follow a podcast, it's because I'm interested in what the person has to say. If you have nothing to say and you're just there to be an audience surrogate, genuinely, what is the point of your podcast? Anyway, I'll get back on topic now. I've got a few more photos of light bulb artifacts that include scans that straight up just show you the 2 LEDs with the wires stuck in there, while Mike talks over the top about how cool and unexplainable they are.
You're never going to believe this. I've been asking people, how the heck do these things work? X-rays were done. The electrical devices were peered into from multiple different angles. How they create this light, what the light is. It's just a big mystery.
And then finally, here is the chessboard. Well, it's a chessboard. Mike Forrest actually says he's recovered over a dozen of these from his various digs. Here's another one. Here's a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, a 6th chessboard. On Facebook, someone calls them fake, and Mike links them to a paper that claims the collection's genuine. On Instagram, someone asks if they can buy one of the chessboards. Mike tells them, this board specifically would have to be for an offer that set me really in the right direction to get the museum going. Mike Forrest clearly wants people to believe the chessboards are real, and he wants them to give him money for them. How much money? Down payment on a building money. Let's pull back. I have this thing. I call it the scale of fraudulence. It's my rough attempt to classify different tiers of people who have unusual beliefs. On the lowest tier, you have your cranks, crackpots, and kooks. These are people who hold some unusual beliefs. I would put myself in that bucket. Above them, you have cookers. These are people whose unusual beliefs fundamentally separate them from basic reality in some way. Usually that's garden variety science denial, with conspiracist belief playing a large part as well. Cookers will engage in baking, the art of throwing a bunch of unconnected facts or ideas together and staring at them until they assemble themselves into a grand proof of whatever the cooker already wanted to think. Your estranged uncle who posts on Facebook about the vaccines making people gay is a cooker. His apophenic bias towards justificatory syncretism has blinded him to the healing power of simply not posting. On the level above that, on the scale of fraudulence, are the confidence men. These are people who use their unusual beliefs to get attention and influence. They're people who sell confidence as currency, to not just be a consumer of unusual ideas, but a producer of them, a thought leader. The reward for them might not always be financial, and their beliefs may on some level be genuine, but they are happy to provide the breadcrumbs that the cookers use to stay in their unusual beliefs in exchange for something the con man wants. Above even them are the charlatans. A charlatan is knowingly lying. They don't actually hold the unusual beliefs that they propagate. When they run a con, it's motivated entirely by personal gain. The way you can tell them apart from confidence men is that a charlatan says things that could only ever be the complete truth or a total lie, trusting that their marks will accept the more charitable option. Finally, you have cultists. These are people who deploy an unusual belief system to create and maintain a high-control group of followers in close proximity to them. They are, in my opinion, evil, and thankfully don't appear in this story. So where does Mike Forrest sit on the scale of fraudulence? It was that question that even after I'd finished editing this video, I was still kind of sitting on. So I decided to put into context exactly how this scam actually operates on the ground. On YouTube, there's a huge trend of hunters digging and killing giant snakes. I promise you this makes sense in a second. These are 4 videos that were published in the last few days from multiple different channels that all depict the same people in the same locations hunting the same giant white python. They are very physically aggressive with the python, it's clearly buried in a man-made hole, and it's part of this genre of video on YouTube where people go and bury or plant snakes to film themselves digging them back up again. Why does this happen? Essentially, in the places where these videos are being filmed, there are groups of people who, for one reason or another, have access to snakes. There are lots of snakes around. And they've realized that if they make this kind of video with this kind of title and this kind of thumbnail, it regularly gets tens of thousands of views. And over the last 5 or 6 years, it's built a massive community online. So what you do is you spend a day filming like 6 of these videos with the same group of snakes. You dig different holes, you have the actors do slightly different things, you involve dogs in one video, there's a second snake in another, there's a pit of snakes in a third, and then you upload all of them to various different channels and you get so much ad revenue that it justifies the investment that you've put in. This kind of video is preying on a type of audience member, the type who either sees this as just straight up entertainment or who isn't really looking too closely as to whether or not it's real. It's unsurprisingly the kind of thing that a lot of kids get interested in because it's so obviously fantastical in the storyline. But what you have is a group of people who have independently figured out that this is a viable way to make a little bit of extra money in a situation where they're probably not making all that much outside of these videos. Some of them have probably made full and successful careers, but having once looked into this, the individual actors who appear in these videos generally don't get paid very well. It's an intensely fascinating thing to me, and it's very analogous to the kind of way that something like this happens. You have a financial incentive that people like Mike Forrest present. He is buying these artifacts, he's paying the people who are digging them up, and he's funding these excavations in various different ways. He's supplying them with equipment, tools to make the videos, he's telling them what to film and where to dig, all of this sort of stuff. So their incentive to go and produce these artifacts for Mike Forrest is very high. Even if Mike isn't personally there on the ground directing people to carve the stones and to put particular iconography on things, he doesn't really need to. Although I suspect he is quite involved in that process for reasons that we'll get into. There's an incentive structure that's set up that people who are in a difficult situation feel incentivized to participate in. And the fact that what they're doing is, in some sense, a lie, in some sense, fraudulent, doesn't really matter. Oh, honestly, why should they care? It would be like trying to convince these people who make the giant snake videos that what they're doing is wrong and bad for society in some way. Are you really going to begrudge them making a little bit of money? The key difference as I see it between the giant snake phenomenon and the Aztlan Collection is that someone has to be calling the shots. Someone has to be uploading the videos to Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook to hundreds of thousands of followers. And that person who has at one time claimed that the dig sites are under his purview is Mike Forrest. Mike Forrest is a charlatan. If these chess sets, pipes, glowing skulls, stone Rolexes, ankhs, handbags, rocket ships, astronauts, and busty snake women aren't actually real, someone has to be burying them in the ground. And Mike is the one pointing to where people should dig. Thankfully, Mike hasn't yet listed any of the chessboards on eBay as far as I've found. He does have quite a few other items for sale there, some of them for upwards of tens of thousands of dollars, and he's more than willing to part with a few more during the tours of his personal collection that he organizes for people. One wonders how much he charges them. But finding the chessboard on his Instagram was only phase 1 of my search. The next step was to hunt for something even more elusive: Mike's motives. See, Mike doesn't limit himself to building clout the old-fashioned way, that is, telling lies on the internet. He's willing to spend money, break rules, and make enemies. Dedunking, the guy whose video on the Aztlan Collection got me started on this whole thing to begin with, although he can't even spell it correctly, admits early on in the video that Mike Forrest paid him to talk about them. And while he says it doesn't affect his opinions, he ends up saying a lot of stuff that made Mike Forrest very happy, enough to repost clips from the video onto his 400,000 follower Insta. That raises another question. Why did Mike pick dedunking? Well, my first guess is that there's not that many people who are so nakedly willing to cede editorial control of their channels for a few bucks, but it goes deeper than that. Dedunking has, in the past, stated that he's willing to be convinced that ancient alien contact with humanity is real. His idol, Graham Hancock, has a book about a lost civilization on Mars, and talks sometimes about ultra-terrestrials that can be contacted by getting really, really high. So the fact that the Aztlan Collection can never be divorced from its alien iconography isn't a big issue for dedunking conceptually. But it goes even deeper than that still. On the 18th of June 2024, archaeologist John Hoops had a conversation with Mike Forrest on Facebook. The conversation happened in public on a forum for discussing the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. For a detailed summary of this hypothesis, go ask Mini-Minuteman, Flint Dibble, or World of Antiquity. For a brief summary, go ask the untrained VTuber with a dancing alien in a jar on their desk. Yes, there. Or, although I usually prefer they, them, if you're especially nice to me, you can also use fey, fem, fair pronouns. Anyway, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis is the hypothesis that during the Younger Dryas, there was an impact. By impact, I mean that a comet struck the Earth like the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. By the Younger Dryas, I mean roughly 12,000 years ago, around about the time of the invention of farming. And by hypothesis, I mean extremely controversial idea, generally promoted either as an intriguing what-if scenario, or as a full-blown conspiracy theory that an ancient civilization of super-advanced humans that may or may not have been in contact with aliens that gave them magic ruled the world before the comet came and blew them all up. Mike Forrest, for obvious reasons, generally prefers the latter version, and Hoops is, shall we say, skeptical. So Hoops asks Forrest, among other things, if his dig sites in Mexico that unearth these relics are, legal? He says that you need permission and inspections by INAH to have an archaeological dig, and asks Forrest if he's working with any professional archaeologists. Forrest answers that he isn't, ducks the question about if what he's doing is illegal or not, and also offers something telling. He'll pay, he says, for Hoops to fly down there and assess the dig sites himself. Hoops does not end up going. Less than a month after this public conversation between Hoops and Mike, Dedunking made a video blasting Hoops over his public skepticism of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Now, in my opinion, based on the facts I've seen so far, I think it's vanishingly unlikely, nigh impossible to consider the idea that Forrest and Dedunking conspired to produce the video. But it's an absolutely perfect example of what makes Dedunking the exact type of person Forrest could count on to make a video that would, no matter what Dedunking actually said in it, help Mike promote his collection. All he really needed was something to point Dedunking in the right direction. And this was the easy part. Forrest has a paper that proves his alien carvings are the real deal. Well, he had a paper. At one time, Mike Forrest was helping a guy named Trevor Hawk, who I've pictured here in high definition. Hawk has his own cooker theory that a bunch of ancient sites in South America were made with a chemical geopolymer that proves they were built by the super people with magic powers, and he glommed onto the Aztlan Collection as a way to prove it. So he whipped up a quote-unquote research group and wrote a paper. The paper is bad. It's really bad. I'm not exaggerating. It attempts to prove the carvings are ancient by carbon dating some resin used to stick bits together, not mentioning that exact resin is known to be found in ancient deposits and is actually collected by people from those deposits in the modern day to sell as a magical substance. One of the people who collects it is a guy named Joshua Sisler, a stone carving artist who just so happens to be the exact same guy who first quote-unquote discovered the Aztlan Collection ancient stone carvings. More on him later. Trevor Hawk's paper also botches its main claim that the stone is a chemically made geopolymer, conducting tests that don't actually rule out naturally occurring stones. Hawk at one point uses a tiny hobbyist Geiger counter that connects to an app on your phone to try to prove the stones contain uranium. It's really not a good paper. I made a whole video going over these issues using a rebuttal paper written by Anthony Von Doom that rips it to shreds, but I've given you the highlights there. Mike Forrest gave this paper to Deconstructing, and Deconstructing used it to spin his video as being an attempt to bring into the spotlight science that the mainstream is too scared to investigate. Effectively for Mike, it meant that Deconstructing wasn't going to look too closely at anything that might be problematic, like omnitrixes and LEDs stuck inside fake gems. The charitable reading is that Deconstructing got absolutely played, and quite masterfully. Trevor Hawk eventually came to feel that he had been played by Mike. A month after Deconstructing's video on the Aztlan Collection came out, Trevor messaged him saying this: "I wanted to let you know that I am not affiliated with Mike Forrest of Alien Carvings in any way. It is unfortunate that he chooses to pirate my research while never naming me, tagging me, and essentially framing it as his own work. When I asked him to have the decency to tag me, he erupted on me, threatened me with a lawsuit, and said he would correct the posts for $500. So yeah, heads up." He also called Forrest dishonest, which in my mind is a very nice thing to say about someone who you allege demanded you pay him $500 to attach your name to your own work or else he would sue. One of the big problems for Mike is that he claims all the artifacts he promotes are real. He even tries to sell them for thousands of dollars. And since all of them come from the same dig sites and all eventually lead either back to him or his friend Joshua Sisler, he has to defend even the silly ones because they're all buried together. I mean that literally. They're all buried together in these cramped dig sites sitting like a foot below the surface under loose soil, just all thrown together next to each other. You'll have a carved xenomorph skull next to an astronaut with a handbag, just sitting there perfectly undisturbed. The dig videos are incredible stuff. Watching people hack into the soil with pickaxes, dig with trowels like they're trying to stab the ground to death, right next to these artifacts that are supposedly the true story of the ancient history of the planet. They're clearly taking it extremely seriously. They will grab onto the artifacts, yank them around, chip bits off, getting them out, all without having any site markings or any in-situ photography or really anything at all that says this is a legitimate archaeological site. And I can't help but wonder if that's because to this day, Mike runs these digs without the correct permits and without telling the government, almost as if he knows they're not real archaeological digs. But why wonder when we can just go on Mike Forrest's website and see what he has to say? On one of his pages, he writes, "Our mission and intent. We aim to do right. It's never our intent to disrupt the archaeology of any nation or culture. We do not encourage unethically harvesting historical pieces or items from any grounds under any circumstance. We have researched this topic in a very detailed manner to make sure none of these things are violated. We document everything here for all to see." And then he adds, "Posted above are official documents which show the official response to these stones. The official response is from the government claiming that the stones are fake. Here are some of those documents for your viewing pleasure." So there you go. Mike Forrest takes the ethics of his dig sites very seriously and does not encourage unethically harvesting historical pieces or items from any grounds under any circumstances, and has researched the topic in a very detailed manner to make sure none of these things are violated. I'm repeating that for emphasis because this is a message that I received from Mike Forrest. No, the digs are not permitted. I reached out to him saying, "Hi there, I'm working on a piece for online publication in regards to the Aztlan Collection and the alien carving artifacts, and I'm reaching out for comment. I had a few questions. 1. Are your dig sites for the artifacts carried out with permits and inspections from relevant authorities? 2. Do you work with archaeologists on these digs? 3. Do all the artifacts on your Instagram and TikTok come from digs you or people affiliated with you have participated in? Thanks. Have a good day." To my delight, Mike was very forthcoming and replied extremely quickly, saying, "Hey there, thanks for reaching out." 1. No, the digs are not permitted, nor are they my digs. I'm an author and investigator, so I've worked with over 30 families and multiple international teams who have gone down there and done the digging. 2. I do work with archaeologists and anthropologists. They are not present at every dig, however. Many of the digs are being done by looters. It took me great convincing to get them to document their crimes. However, the truth here stands up taller than any law. 3. As far as all the pieces I document in my page, 95% of them come from groups I'm involved with directly. I do post occasional pieces, usually declared from other sources, etc., if they're worth showing. So Mike's website says, "We do not encourage unethically harvesting historical pieces. We make sure none of these things are violated." Mike, in a message to me, says, The digs are not permitted, they're done by looters, and they are explicitly crimes. I guess that answers that question. The bind that Mike is in is that these digs, which he claims are done by other people but organized by him, but obviously he's the one organizing them, providing the incentive, providing the finances, and telling people how to film, convincing them, as he says. If they're illegal, it would be because the artifacts are real. So because he's claiming the artifacts are real, the digs have to be illegal. But the digs being illegal is a really big ethical problem for him, so on his website he has a disclaimer saying that it's not unethical and all the digs are legal. It's a huge catch-22. He can try and say that, well, the government thinks that the artifacts are fake anyway. That means that the dig site becomes legal, but that doesn't really make any sense because you think it's legitimate, and you admit that these are crimes being done by looters in digs that are not permitted. Even worse than that, Mike is implicating all of the people who he has gotten to help him dig up these artifacts, present these artifacts to the public, in crimes. All of these families who he says he works with, who he's collaborated with, he is throwing them under the bus here and saying they are complicit in unpermitted digs. He's not the one who lives in Mexico. If anyone's going to get in trouble as a result of this, it's going to be those families, not Mike. What would Deconstructing have to say about all of this? Well, he's been fairly strident in the past against people using illegally obtained artifacts. He had a whole series of videos wherein he accused archaeologist Flint Dibble of teaching classes with unethically and illegally obtained Native American bones.
So there's a very real possibility that at some point Flint was teaching a class with an illegal Native American bone in his hand, immorally obtained and illegal to still be holding. Now, he didn't know that at the time. And maybe it wasn't even him. Maybe it was a colleague of his. But certainly somebody there, the president, said so, right? And here's the issue. This is the kind of thing I would normally never talk about because this is something they have to clean their own house. This is history correcting itself. We're getting more modern. We're figuring shit out. We fix the sins of our past as best we can. But
that turned out to not be true at all, but he mentioned it multiple times. It clearly was a big deal to him that this guy was, in his mind, carrying about with illegally obtained artifacts. He also has a video on his channel all about how archaeology has trampled over the rights of Native American people. Again, it seems like it's a big deal to him when archaeology does things that are illegal or unethical. So, when he makes a video collaborating with Mike Forrest and taking Mike Forrest's money and showing on screen Mike Forrest's artifacts, it's interesting to me that he doesn't disclose to his audience that 100% of the artifacts from Mike Forrest's digs are obtained without correct permission, sometimes by looters, in what Mike Forrest describes as crimes. Deconstructing says he's physically touched some of these artifacts.
Now, I have handled a number of these artifacts in the past. An owner of several of them, Mike Forrest, who runs the Alien Carvings website, lives not far from me, and he actually asked me to evaluate these.
One wonders if that's any different at all to his accusations against Flint, that Flint had touched unethically, illegally obtained Native American bones. Again, is the difference here just going to be, well, they could be fake, so all of this would ethically be okay? Because then in the video, when Deconstructing says he thinks some of them are real, that he's absolutely tying himself up in an ethical Gordian knot.
I do think that some of these pieces are legit, but I think we need to establish a baseline.
I reached out for Deconstructing for comment as well, but I didn't hear back from him. I'm sure at some point, if he feels the need to reach out or clarify, he will do so. In terms of quantifying some sense of material harm here, I said before that it probably isn't such a big deal that families over in Vietnam are filming these fake videos of them digging up snakes. I do think that there's some sense of material harm in terms of our culture and our ability to distinguish and promote content that's real versus fake, but in the grand scheme of things, who really cares? In this case, this is someone who is making money off of the promotion of claims that tie into various science denialist viewpoints that are becoming more and more talked about in the mainstream. Whether that's in a positive or a negative way, it doesn't really matter. This is somebody who is trying to make money off of selling these artifacts to an audience that believes that they are real, and is also trying to convince new people that these artifacts are real, and then presenting them with opportunities to invest in, for example, Mike's museum. On top of all of that, when push comes to shove, Mike says that the acts are illegal, but that would only really fall upon the people who are doing the digs, the people who the Mexican government and authorities could actually go after, not Mike himself. He's importing and exporting all of these artifacts over to him so he can build his museum and sell them on eBay, but he himself says that they've been gotten illegally. That's kind of the problem. If these artifacts are indeed real, beyond all reasonable logic, then Mike is the head of a criminal organization who illegally digs up these artifacts, prevents them from being properly studied, illegally sends them overseas, doesn't let the owners of the property or the artifacts themselves receive proper acknowledgement or income, and then sells them on to tourists and uninterested parties who are not going to allow them to be studied further, except in cases where they can be given to people like Trevor Hawke, whose conclusions are essentially a sure thing. You already know that they're going to agree with you, so it's perfectly safe to let them take one of the gemstones out to carbon date the resin underneath. You're not really too worried about that because it's going to raise the value of all your other artifacts if more people believe they're real. If the more likely outcome is true and all of these things are completely fake, then Mike is knowingly lying about them. He's knowingly promoting misinformation about Mexican history, South American history, the history of the entire world, if you factor in the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, in order to make money for him directly. I'm kind of torn because I don't enjoy calling somebody a liar or a charlatan or suggesting that what they're doing might be unethical, but I really can't see any way out of it here. If Mike's a true believer, then again, he's essentially a gang leader, and if he isn't, then he's a complete fraud. This is one of those situations where you have the distinction in the scale of fraudulence between believers and non-believers, between your charlatans and your everybody else. The things that a charlatan says either have to be knowing lies or the complete 100% truth, and there's absolutely no in between. That's exactly what I see here for Mike. And given the fact his claims are so patently absurd, without any substantive evidence to back them up whatsoever, and because his methods for promoting these artifacts seem so intentionally underhanded, paying YouTubers to make videos, demanding that people who disagree with you pay you, threatening lawsuits, all of this behavior reads to me as inherently dishonest. So as much as I don't like saying it, as much as I'm glad that Mike responded to my request for comment, and it makes me want to give him a level of charity, I just can't. Joshua Sizzler, who, as you'll recall, is Mike Forrest's friend and the person generally credited with the original discovery of the Aztlan Collection, outside of his day job as a stone carver, would not be very happy that I'm describing the collection like this. He's already challenged me to a debate, then walked it back, then unwalked it back across multiple lengthy AI-generated messages to me. He demanded that I watch this video of his where he claims to show how the carvings on the stones are totally different to the carvings he makes in his work as a stone carving artist. So I watched the video. He starts by showing these two artifacts, which are the allegedly ancient ones. I got you. Only one of these is meant to be ancient. In his words, to hear him describe it, it's all about the patina.
Patina, patina, patina. Patina, 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 patinas, patina, 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 patina. Patina is patina, 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 patina.
So that raises the question, is it possible to fake the patina? Helpfully, Joshua Sizzler explains exactly how.
You could fake patinas as well, right? That's what we even do. You create a major patina when you carve a stone or, you polish a stone. Even as of now, we use, cerium oxide and different things that will actually heat up the outer layer of the stone and make it crystal clear. It creates almost like a perfect skin over the crystal. And I'm just further analyzing just scrolling around this piece because you can really see the age. And when you look at these areas that are dark, they're still filled with dirt, but you could see the patina is really rich all through this thing.
Right after he gets done explaining how one might fake the patina, he claims he didn't do that and that the artifacts are indeed genuine. Fantastic. I have no doubt that this piece will fetch a very high price with those totally unblemished and polished smooth gemstones embedded in that scratched up and dinged rock, which, oddly enough, looks like it's been weathered with something that produces even straight scratches. Must have been the wind. Sizzler and Forrest, as far as I can tell, continue to share a symbiotic relationship. Sizzler has mimicked Forrest's website and merch page and even uses the same god-awful AI prompts to make his YouTube thumbnails and Instagram posts. Genuinely, these are so ugly, it made me consider not making the video. Sizzler isn't as polished at the grift yet, as he's still ranting in YouTube comment sections instead of being the one paying YouTubers. Even Trevor Hawk knew he should ghost me when I accepted his request to be interviewed. He said my video had so many issues, so many issues, he couldn't possibly explain all of them, and then ran away. For their part, Deconstructing and Mike have continued their individual cons without registering much of a blip from all this. For guys like them, they can just move on to the next outrageous claim instead of worrying about being correct or honest. I'm mostly annoyed I had to cover the Aztlan Collection again. Don't get me wrong, it's incredibly funny, but I'd rather be looking into the skies than into the dirt. These are just so patently silly and absurd to me that it's even more ludicrous people are spending any amount of effort trying to claim they're at all legitimate. I mean, just list the chessboards on eBay and be done with it. Obviously, that's the entire sham, though. It relies on the people who are buying into it not being aware enough to realize that the entire thing is so obviously ludicrous it cannot possibly be real. Those are the kinds of people who have no qualms about parting with hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or house deposit payment amounts for these artifacts. The type of people who you can show in a video the LEDs, tell them they're not LEDs, and they'll just believe you. The type of people who don't have any qualms at all about how all of these artifacts look so perfectly tailored to trick specifically them. The type of people who don't really care if the archaeological digs are legal, or if Mike Forrest is a big grifter, or if Deconstructing knows at all what he's talking about. Those are the types of people that are targeted by this grift. And then it relies on people like Trevor Hawk to try and lend an air of legitimacy to some of the less ridiculous-looking artifacts, so they can push it slightly more into the mainstream to get the attention of those people who then go and look at pages like Mike's Instagram and go, wow, oh my goodness, a magical scrying mirror and an astronaut and a rocket ship, oh my goodness. It's extremely predatory at the end of the day. And that's the key here. The financial motive for everybody involved in this story is incredibly blatant. Sizzler and Forrest make money when they sell artifacts or merch or their books or their time at conventions and on podcasts. Hawk makes money when people buy his magical geopolymer recipes and invest in his new age harmonic resonance frequency company. Deconstructing makes money when Forrest literally slides it into his pocket. The only one who hasn't made any money off of this whole sham is me. I'm not even monetized yet. What am I doing here? I'll be back. I've got to go bury some rocks in the garden so I can actually afford to move apartments. You guys know the drill. Do the usual things. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video. When these things are nice and patinaed up, I'll let you all know how many tens of thousands of dollars you can buy them for. Until then,